Hello world of YouTube and welcome to my listening log update for April of 2021. I've got 9 records to talk about. My one request that I had was filled. I did a little bit of catch up and a lot of new stuff dropped. So let's go ahead and get going. Who let the dope boys out? Thank God you let me. The boys in Brockhampton are back with Roadrunner, New Light, New Machine, a record that I have been highly anticipating because I like Brockhampton. I really love Ginger. Thought it was a great bounce back from the, while initially dazzling Iridescence, it was a record that I still don't really revisit as much as I do their Saturation stuff or Ginger as a whole. And I like that on Roadrunner, New Light, New Machine, we see them continuing to expand on Ginger in aspects and that emotional side that they've been really tapping into, especially from that record onward. They also find ways to bring back even more of that boisterous, rambunctious side that coded the pre-Iridescence stuff. You know, there were bangers on Ginger, but there wasn't a buzz cut on Ginger. There wasn't a don't shoot up the party on Ginger. There wasn't a bankroll on Ginger. You know, while Bankroll had been around since like 2018, it kind of fits the spirit of this record a lot, because this record feels like them really trying to get back into the swing of things. You know, this feels a lot like Kesha's most recent record in that it's still reflective. You know, there's still tracks like Old News and I'll Take You On, who also have features that fit the instrumentals incredibly well, and the production on those feel more like offshoots of Ginger with the guitar usage, and also the light twosome, which see Joba and Kevin Abstract really getting super personal in the same way that you saw on tracks like Wait or some of the more emotionally heavy parts of Ginger. You still have the smooth side of tracks like Count on Me that still feel reflective in their own right. You even have the 6-minute posse cut, Windows, which has everybody getting real personal and reflective, but in a way that feels almost like an offshoot of Iridescence with how abrasive some of that gets and how that hook work kind of feels on that track in particular, the production on the hook work. However, on this record, it works so much better, and I think it's because that quality in the production lends to giving that moment some real potency as well, and I think is a good sort of melding of an expansion on a project that may not have completely worked, but works wholesale on here. But I do like that they're striking a balance and they're seemingly trying to find themselves again in a very positive way. And I dig that about this project. This record has a lot of hype. It has some great production. The production on this record might be the best production the guys have pulled together on a project thus far. You know, the meltdown, the beat switch up on Buzzcut when it goes from Kevin Abstract and the Danny Brown stuff to Merlin and Joba's section, incredible. Peggy on Chain On and that old school sounding production feels so fucking right, and the guys sound so on that track. You know, Dom has some incredible bars on that track. And overall, I think that this project definitely lives up to the expectations that I had for it in a lot of gratifying ways. And I feel like, again, coming off of the heels of Ginger, this could have easily been just another really heavily emotionally potent project. But I like that they're expanding their wings again, and this is definitely a very worthwhile project. The guys have a lot of life in them in very gratifying ways, and I feel like this is aces all around. I'm giving it an 8 out of 10. It's a very, very good project from these guys. So this was a request by Rockin' Movies with Tyler, who watched last month's update and was curious as to why I didn't cover Chevelle's record, and I told him I don't really care about Chevelle's music, but he put in a request for it anyway. So I listened to the new record, Niratias, and it didn't really make a fan out of me. This sort of is what I expected from a record from Chevelle. The production feels relatively dated at this point. I think that there are bands that pull off this beefy guitar sound and don't make it quite sound like 2007, but a lot of the guitar production on here sounds... it has that toolish sheen that they're clearly going for with a lot of their rhythm usage and their time signature utilization. And even on tracks like Pistol Star, vocally, they're channeling more of a Maynard James Keenan style. But, I mean, if you like Tool, you might like that about it. And I don't hate Tool, but if I want to listen to Tool, I'll listen to Tool. These guys don't necessarily reinvent that wheel in any way that I think is all that exciting. And I also think that when their vocalist isn't trying to harness his mid to lower register, his voice kind of conflicts with the heavy guitars in a way that was a little distracting to me. You know, tracks like So Long Mother Earth and Peach especially, the vocals just sit in this register where it sticks out from the guitars, and it creates this jarring listening experience for me. You know, while I don't mind the space imagery in the lyrics, and I think that that's neat, there's also a lot of fluff on this record that doesn't add too much to the texturing or atmospheres. Like on Wormhole or Sleep the Deep, these kind of interludes that are supposed to add texturing and overall atmosphere to the project. They don't really do a whole lot for me. And, I mean, this record isn't, like, awful. I could see if you like this style, again, if you like Chevelle, you probably like this record. And that's more power to you. You know, and I think that for a duo to create this sort of beefy of sound is impressive, but ultimately a lot of this just wasn't for me. I didn't think that it was all that interesting, and I didn't think that a lot of the riff work was really all that fresh. You know, the riff work on Self-Destructor and Test Enough felt just like carbon copy of so many bands of their style that didn't really dazzle me in the way that I'm sure you're probably hoping that they would have, Tyler. But yeah, I wasn't overall digging this, to be honest, and even though I'd spun it a couple times, I kind of had to refresh myself when sitting down to talk about it, because it's just one of those records that kind of went in one ear and out the other. Like, it didn't really leave much of an impact on me, man. I'm sorry. Again, not, like, awful, but it's nothing that I would write home about personally. I honestly thought it was kind of boring, to be honest, and a lot of those interludes and fluff kind of weighed down the project for me as well, which is why I'm not giving it, like, a middle-of-the-road rating. I'm giving it, like, a 4 out of 10. You know, it wasn't, like, offensive. It was just bland, like a really bland record in this style, and it wasn't for me. I'm sorry, man.
Squatted in the shade when the mowers overheated, came home stinking.
Now, to shift gears a little bit, Armand Hammer, who dropped one of my favorite hip-hop records of last year, came together with The Alchemist, a producer of a different one of my favorite hip-hop records of last year, and created a collaborative album called Harem that sees them continuing to spit a lot of that abstract style, but with the production that feels a lot more vintage and drone-filled in a way that really suits a more minimal approach that lets their abstract flows sort of fly all over the map. You know, the really abstract structure of Sir Benny Miles is sort of a testament to how loose this record's going to feel in contrast to maybe the more abrasively driven looseness that coated their last record at points. And that sort of flow that coats the entire record leaves this first run of it especially some of the smoothest transitions between tracks I've heard in a minute. It is so fucking creamy and lets that sort of abstract feel continue to flow throughout the project. And while there's still some drones on tracks like Indian Summer that really sort of enhance the heat that is painted in some of the imagery by the guys on the track talking about their lives in the summer and, like, mowing lawns for cash and stuff, everything here still feels as purposeful as it did on Shrines. The production just has this holistically different vibe to it that I still fuck with so very heavily. You know, the low stuttering on Aubergine while the guys just spout out these rhyme assaults like condition forced to conventions forced, but I saw it as an entrance, a door, knew there were no other senses, this is a vision with a vengeance, this is radical ascension, with Billy Woods coming in with I send brothers to the store, I keep something in the cupboard, I'm stubborn, I'm a mother's love measured in eyedroppers. Like, it's these just verbal assaults that I think are so interesting to hear pulled together.
And that abstractness that I was talking about isn't the only strong attribute to this record. The vivid imagery doesn't just stop in that stuff. A lot of the politically charged stuff that Coded Shrines also crops up on here as well, like on the track Black Sunlight. There's bars where Billy Woods goes in with iridescent blackness as his performative praxis. Are we talking about practice? Rock the Kufi backwards, and then spinning it to Magic Negro, Wesley Snipes taxes, dark inside the ibex with 2 ratchets, African accents, American names like Dave and Patrick. Game is the game. Just gotta change tactics. Dude!
And on top of that, they bring in some of the collaborators that were on Shrine who also still excel on this production, like Earl Sweatshirt on Falling Out the Sky, or Quell Chris on Chicharrones, another track that is just so fucking tight. I like a lot of the vibes on this record, and it has moments where it gets a little more intense vocally and verbally, but I feel like it fits some of the subject matter that coats a lot of this project. And it's not without its more mantra-driven stuff as well that I feel like really cements itself in a different vibe, like on Squeegee or the closer Stone Fruit. The refrain on Stone Fruit is so very addictive, even with its length and how much it's used in the track. I feel like it feels purposeful. You know, there's some points on the project that may not come together quite as tightly, but I feel like as a whole, this project's batting average is still super high and still goes toe-to-toe with a lot of the highlights I had on Shrines, and I feel like it's still a great collaboration that came together incredibly well. I gotta say, if you like that abstract style and you haven't listened to any of the previous stuff, and you like what the Alchemist did with Freddie Gibbs last year on Alfredo, you'll like or appreciate how well he comes together when working with 2 completely different rappers than Freddie Gibbs to still create an existence so holistically pulled together with quality. I like this record a lot, and I think it's incredible. Another great notch in the belt for these guys, and I'm giving this an 8 out of 10. It's super fucking good, man.
These Nazis still want to give us the literal gas face. He not satisfied.
On the contrast to that, Talib Kweli came together with Diamond D and made a sort of rapper-producer combo project named Gotham, where Talib gets to just, I feel like, utilize the years he's been spending as a podcaster and turn it into hip-hop. You know, he's here spitting about a lot of the same socially conscious stuff that you may know him for, like on Olympic, where he talks about, you know, right-wing politicians and the hypocrisy seen within the scene, people turning heads against from him immediately. That same socially conscious stuff coming up on Chillin' While Black, a track that really attacks a lot of the issues that black culture has faced very heavily in recent years, very gracefully in my opinion, or even just spitting some New York flavored stuff like on Mamas, or reflecting about his life like on The Quiet One. That track featuring a really good feature from Busta Rhymes, who has this more low-key, smoky flow that fits the instrumental incredibly well. And on the contrast to that, Sky Zoo comes in on the track Attention Span, a track about keeping your bankroll tighter and making better investments in life, and spinning that into a more energetic feature that I think also suits that track incredibly well. And I don't love every track on this project. I feel like while the horns on In Due Time give it a nice bright feel, that feels like pretty mid-tempo, average sort of boom bap. And there's a handful of tracks on here where the production doesn't as dazzle as much as I'd hope it does. The production on here feels more serviceable to just give Talib a platform to do his thing. And Talib doesn't always hit every ball that's thrown at him, but I feel like a lot of this project is still really solid, and I feel like if you enjoy Talib Kweli and you enjoy general boom bap East Coast hip hop, you'll like pockets of what's here, whether it's the socially conscious stuff, Talib's ability to spin bars and throw references out there. Like there's a bar on the first track on here where he spins like a Narcos reference into a completely different reference that leads nowhere into a Filipino politician reference, but he does so incredibly well with that word spinning that he does so well. And that's mostly where this record shines, are the moments like that. But it's pretty solid. I feel like you can't go wrong with a decent chunk of this project. And so I'm going to be giving it a 6 out of 10. It definitely nets positive, but there are pockets that definitely feel a little more forgettable than others, if I'm being honest. You know, when I sat down and reviewed the Offspring's discography, I didn't expect for that review to take off, but it did, and I'm thankful for that. However, I also didn't expect for the Offspring to actually announce a new record, and I was kind of excited, because I was still riding that Offspring hype, and then they dropped the title track, and I was really not into it. And now that the album's here, I'm not really into this record, which is kind of upsetting because when I spun Days Gone By for the discography review, I was really stoked. I liked that record. I thought it was a decent gem in their catalog. It saw them sort of maturing their sounds in a different way while still having some fun, very Offspring-esque moments. And while the title track definitely channels maybe that Offspring vibe, it just doesn't come together well and showcases some of the negative sides that this record will have. One of the things I had in my review with Days Gone By was comparisons to Weezer. And that Weezer comparison feels even more poignant on this project with tracks like We Never Have Sex Anymore, their weird inclusion of the Hall of the Mountain King, the soft version of the title track that's the outro. There's a lot of weird shit going on here. Their version of Gone Away that's on here is not needed whatsoever. I don't need a soft, grand version. We already got one of those, and it sucked. The original, one of your best tracks. This version feels completely unnecessary. Don't get me wrong, it's not all bad. There's actually parts that I enjoy a decent amount on here. I like the tracks Behind Your Walls, Army of One. I love the rhythm. I love the energy on the Opioid Diaries, and I think it carries well into Hassan Chop. Those feel like really normal Offspring songs pulled off incredibly well still. All of those positives really don't compare to how bad those negatives are. And there's even just weird shit on this record. Like the opener, This Is Not Utopia, and even Behind Your Walls have Dexter's vocals taking this different feel for them, and I think it just sounds really jarring and weird. Dexter has a very particular vocal style, and it's one of the things that I really like about this band, and just those pockets really stick out like sore thumbs and continue to set this project back for me. I don't like this thing. I think it's pretty bad. It's not all bad, but it is pretty bad, and I'm currently torn as to where I'd currently rank it in their discography. I'll probably have a recontextualized review out next month, but as it stands, my score for this record is probably a 3 out of 10. It's really not good. It's got highlights, but those highlights are a faint glimmer in a pile of crap. You know, I've covered Mica Zuki BIGWAVE a couple times in the channel over a couple of years now. I really loved the first record that I got into, Starry Sky Romantic. I thought that its follow-up was pretty solid as well, if not a little lesser so than the record that got me into them. But this newest record, METROPOLIS.exe, is easily their weakest record, and maybe one of the weakest records I've heard this year so far. While there are still highlights, I like some of the switch-ups in the title track. I think that sample usage that coats a lot of their grooves is done really well on AI Too Much. I like the bass grooves on Final Shot and魔法戦線Code Music. Mica Zuki has some decent points on it. A lot of this project sits in this muddle gray area where every drop comes way too frequently and doesn't have nearly enough variety to justify the build-up and drop that just happened. It feels like scattershot EDM in the worst way possible. You know, I don't like a lot of the approach to this project. I feel like while some of the bass grooves are still there on some of the tracks that I haven't mentioned, it doesn't come together full stop across the project, and it honestly feels like it blurs together in this muddled mess as well, you know. And it's kind of a disappointment because of that. Because like I said, I like their last couple of records. They've stayed on my radar because those records had some highlights on them. But I feel like I hear that drop sound way too frequently on here. And it almost sounds like a metronome more than it does a point of a vibe switch up, if anything, you know? And it's upsetting. And a lot of the texturing on here just feels super generic as well. It feels more like generic YouTube outro music more than it does any sort of laid-back summer funk jams that drew me into them in the first place. I don't know, man. This record just isn't for me. I definitely not, when compared to the other two records, I think that it's really, I think it's not good. I think it's pretty bad. And my score is going to reflect that. I'm going to give it a 2. A 2 out of 10. It's super bland. Super bland. And, yeah, big disappointments for me personally. Now to completely switch it up to a realm unlike Mikazuki BIGWAVE full stop, Cannibal Corpse, the classic death metal band, dropped a new record, Violence Unimagined, and it is business as usual for the band in a very good way. If you like Cannibal Corpse, you're gonna like this record. The vocals are super harsh, very aggressive. The guitars are pummeling. Hell, the riff work on Inhumane Harvest and the solo work on Neurogenic Destruction and on Bound and Burn just feel like waves of heaviness over the listener. You know, the bass that comes in on Follow the Blood is vintage death metal in the best way possible. And those blast beats that crop up all throughout this record are heavy as hell. This is just brutal, very Cannibal Corpse, full stop. And again, if you don't like that, you're not going to like this record. But I like that, and I like that the production on this record suits that sound so very well. The guitars have this just harshness to them that pairs really well with the vocals that bark over them so intensely. You know, when Ritual Annihilation starts and it switches up from a lot of that groovier heaviness that was on the last couple of tracks into this just all-out assault, you really feel those drums pummel you in the face. And I love that so much. My biggest complaint, if we're talking about production and how the record sounds, is the bass. When the bass is heard, it's great, and I like that. Like I said, especially on the track Follow the Blood, I love the bass work on that. I think it sounds really nice. I just wish it popped a little more. You know, when I'm listening to older records, there's like Tomb of the Mutilated, the classic. That bass sounds so prominent on the project, and it's for good reason, because they got good bass work in their records. But that is a shy complaint in comparison to everything else on display here. It is brutal, it is heavy, it is visceral, and it is so very intense. It's a solid-ass record that I feel like if you enjoy this band, it's worth your time. It's like I said up at the top, it's business as usual, and I'm okay with the business here if they're back in it. I'm giving it a 7. It's really, really good, guys. I like this sound. Obviously, it's not my favorite thing in the world, but if I'm going to hype it up, if I'm going to gas up a record this year in this vein, I'm really happy that this record is as solid and consistent as it is. You know, Cannibal Corpse aren't my favorite band, but they were one of my gateways into extreme metal, and I'm happy that all this time later, they're still churning out really solid material, in my opinion. Now for a record that I'm incredibly hyped for, Gojira's Fortitude, a follow-up to their 2016 record Magma, a record that I really liked, even if by and large a lot of people didn't like. I didn't mind their focus on even more harmony, clean stuff. You know, I even like some of the more standard song structures that go to that project. You know, it still had riffs, and it had some cool ideas at its core too. But I will say, this follow-up Fortitude isn't hitting me in the way that I thought it would. Don't get me wrong, it's still good. It's still very, very solid. But I was hoping for a lot more with this project, especially given how much I loved the first single from this album, Another World, and the follow-up single, Born for One Thing. Easily two of the strongest cuts on the project, too. They see them sort of having their business-as-usual sound expanded a little more, still having some of that harmony work layered in there, some true heaviness in the riff work, and those drums are fantastic. I even like the tracks where they do switch it up a little bit, like Hold On. Some of the harmony work on that almost reminds me of Ghost in a haunting sort of way that I think comes across really well. And the mouth harp sort of twangy instrumentation on Amazonia fits really well, and I feel like fits the subject matter of the song as well. They're going for this like forest sounding jam, and the whole track is about the Amazon rainforest, and it's great. I think it's another great economically or ecologically fueled song by this band that shows their strength from a songwriting standpoint. And I also like some of the later of the record tracks, Into the Storm and Grind as well. I think that those are some other really solid cuts on the record that show that even this time, even this late in their career, they're still able to bring some heat when they want to. But some of the weaker points on this record stick out to me like a sore thumb. I'll be honest, while I think Newfound is a decent longer cut, and I don't like the run of the title track through Sphinx. I hate that the title track feels like a glorified interlude. I really don't like the chant. It feels like the back end of Art of Dying stretched out into one very uninteresting song. And the Sphinx feels like sort of another just song that exists on this record. And I don't really like the trails either for the same reason. You know, while there were elements on Magma where it felt like they were sort of riding this one groove into this sort of seeing where it goes and seeing how they can evolve it, they did it much more gratifyingly on Magma than they do on some of the tracks here, like I mentioned. And I feel like it feels like a much more boring experience as a result. You know, and it's not necessarily a shame. They're trying to spread their wings. They're experimenting in new ways. And I commend them for that. And I feel like I said, some of the experiments work. It's just that some don't in a way that I was really hoping it would. This is clearly a very successful record for them. I've been seeing that this record's doing super big numbers, and I'm happy for them. Because Gojira are one of my favorite bands, and I'm happy to see them succeed. And I'm hoping that this success brings them, you know, new fans that listen to the other work that they've done. Because this isn't the only record like this in their catalog that feels like they're evolving. But I feel like the evolving on this record isn't as interesting as it is in other records in their career that I love much more. It's not their worst record, but I do think it is one of the weaker entries in their discography. And I'm giving it a 7 out of 10. Right inside me. And the last record I tracked out was the most recent record from Royal Blood, Typhoons, a follow-up to their 2017 record, How Did We Get So Dark? A record that I wasn't super into, and the more that I revisited, didn't really give me much that I enjoyed. Even though I like some of their singles, this is a band I haven't fully gotten into as a whole. But this new record, I feel like, is a step in the right direction. They glam it up a bit on this project that I think suits and lets them stand out in their own ways that I was hoping they would find come this point in their career. You know, tracks like the opener Troubles Coming, Limbo, and Hold On, and Either You Want It have these piano parts that fit that sort of glam style and add a good accent to their bass grooves. And they pair those decent glam tinged tracks with some decent rock cuts as well, like the track Typhoons or the track Who Needs Friends. While I think Boilermaker takes a minute to get going once it does, I enjoy the groove that's there. And I even enjoy how in the outro, All We Have Is Now, they let those pianos take a completely different sheen that gives this sort of intimate feeling that I was hoping was a little more on the record, because the track Oblivion also kind of teases that in a different way, and I enjoy that track, and I kind of wish there was a little more of it here. You know, not everything hits.
You know, I don't really like the electronic groove A Million and One. It feels similar to what Death From Above were honestly doing on their most recent record, but I feel like Death From Above did a lot better. Like I said, Boilermaker takes a while to get going, and I feel like Mad Visions does too, and it doesn't necessarily have as gratifying of a build-up as Boilermaker does to me.
But when it does, it hits pretty solidly, and I think that this is definitely a step above What We Do in the Dark by a decent margin, and I like that this band is sort of finding ways to let themselves stand out in ways that I feel like aren't as derivative as some of the sources that you could clearly hear they were inspired from with their music. But yeah, this is good. It's got good hooks, it's got some good dance grooves, got some shine. You know I love me some bass, and I think this record is definitely worth your time if you like that sort of thing. I'm giving this a 6 out of 10. Very, very solid record by these two. And that's going to do it. That's going to be my listening log update for the month. Did you like it? Did you like my reviews of these records? If you didn't, or if you did, let me know what you thought of them in the comments down below. If you have a request for me to do for the listening log updates, you can also leave that down there as well. My listening log update is linked down there if you want to see what's on my radar, what I've already done, all that sort of stuff. It's on my Rate Your Music page. But If you did like this review, be sure to give it a like. If you want to see more of my music, gaming, and general nerdery content, be sure to subscribe. Special thanks to my patrons. If you want to join their ranks to get early access to content, exclusive content, or to help drive the community, it's linked in the description. I'm going to get out of here, though. I have been Viral Rack. You guys have good days, lives, and situations, and I'll see you another day.